In book publishing in 1977. I'm ancient. I don't know how many of you here started in book publishing before that, but I started as an advertising copywriter, promotional copywriter at Josie Bass Publishers in San Francisco, $9,000 a year salary, pretty hard to live in San Francisco even then, at $9,000 a year, but I was fresh out of college, and so I've been in book publishing my entire professional career. I subsequently became marketing director, then an editor, then editorial director, then executive vice president, and finally in 1989, president and CEO of Josie Bass. While I was editor, I founded the Josie Bass Business and Management Series, which became quickly the largest, most profitable area of the company, publishing area of the company. I think it still is now, 40 years later. The most profitable area of the company. But after all these years in book publishing, 46 years in book publishing, I still view myself as a promotional copywriter. I'm a promotional copywriter masquerading as an editor, masquerading as a company president, but I'm still a promotional copywriter. And which I believe is actually one of the very best ways to enter into publishing kinds of experience. As a young, fresh out of college promotional copywriter, I was a whiz kid. I would write this promotional copy that if you followed my chain of logic from the first sentence to the second sentence to the third sentence, by the time you got to the seventh sentence, you were trapped. You had to buy the book. There was no way out. The logic was so airtight. And then I got a little bit wiser, a little bit more experienced, and realized, you dummy, if it's taking 7 sentences to get to the punchline, that's not good copy. And so my whole career since then, I've been striving to get to the punchline in the first or the second sentence. And that's been my quest in my life in publishing, and how the promotional copywriting still influences everything I do in publishing. So the story of how Amy referred to this, the story of how I left Josie Bass and founded Berrett-Koehler. I'll give you a little bit more color about it. It's a good story. So Josie Bass was acquired by Robert Maxwell, who at the time was the chief rival to Rupert Murdoch. He had a media empire that included book publishing companies, television stations, newspapers, very much like Rupert Murdoch. And he acquired Josie Bass. I've been leading an internal attempt to try and take the company. The founder, Alan Josie Bass, had stepped down. I was trying to keep it private, or to keep it independent, and failed. And so we were bought by Robert Maxwell. He put us as a division of Macmillan. And so we went from being this small independent company to being a division in a great big media conglomerate. And I was now reporting to a boss in New York City who was a bureaucrat who had no understanding, appreciation whatsoever of our company, what we were about, what we were doing. And on April 8th, 1991, I got a call, 2 years into being CEO, I got a call from my boss in New York, and he said, we're having a corporate-wide workforce reduction. Every unit is required to reduce its headcount by 10%. We had 68 employees. We were required to reduce our headcount to 60. Actually, it was more than 10%, but we were squibbling over that. There was no rhyme or reason for this. We had just finished a fiscal year in which our revenues were up 22%, our profits were 46%. We were just doing tremendously well. We were growing very well. We'd actually already been approved by Macmillan to hire 8 more people. And now we say, no, you have to fire 8 people. For a lot of the New York units, it was no big deal because they had so much turnover. If they just didn't fill their open positions, they would hit their headcount target. We had almost no turnover. And we had a culture, so we literally would have had to lay off 8 people. We had a culture in which our very first employee was still there, hired about 24 years before. We continued to work with the same suppliers. same authors. It was a culture of continuity, and this was completely at odds with that. So I refused to do it. Our management team supported me. I went through the next period of weeks battling back and forth with the corporate bigwigs about this, and finally I got summoned to New York City to meet with Mr. Robert Maxwell in person at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. He had the entire floor of the hotel was his suite. And I met there with him and with the President Macmillan Inc., and the President Macmillan Publishing Company. They were 4 layers above me in the hierarchy. They skipped my boss. And they gave me repeated ultimatums that I had to go along with this workforce reduction or resign or be fired. And I said, you know, this just makes no sense at all. There's no reason for doing this. And they made no attempt to try and say there was a good reason to do it. They just couldn't have this little California company defying the corporate order. And so we didn't resolve anything. I flew back to California. It was on a Friday. I flew back the following Wednesday, which was May 24th, 1991. My boss and the VP of Human Resources for Macmillan showed up about 2 p.m. and I thought they would come and try and work out some kind of a compromise. Instead, they immediately fired me, and it was the classic thing: we'll clean out your desk, you need to get everything out of here. And so I did. I went to my home, and the grapevine, it worked very quickly, as Amy said, and the next day I started getting phone calls. And kind of true to what the sessions that we just had about the book printers at BMI, what happened was a printer, a book printing company that Josie Bassett worked with. The president of the book printing company called me the very next day with 2 of his partners and colleagues. This company also had a warehousing shipping service. They also had a marketing materials printing business. They also had a direct mail business, and so they had kind of had the whole infrastructure for a professional book publishing company. They called me up the next day and they said, we heard what happened. We don't like what happened. We've liked working with you. We'd like to encourage you to start a publishing company, support you in starting a publishing company. We'll provide the credit you need. We'll provide all the infrastructure you need. And then a couple of weeks later, another printing company also contacted me, Malloy Printing Company, and Joe Upton was really youngster then at Malloy, but they called me and matched the same terms. And so it was really the printing companies that kind of took the lead of giving this upstart a start. I created originally kind of detailed plans of, big document of all these ideas of how to start a publishing company. I was going to start sending this out and trying to get support for doing so. Multiple pages, lots of great ideas in it. And then I realized, you dummy, just answer your phone. All these people are coming to you, offering things. So people started calling me, authors started calling me. That very next day, Warren Bennis, who's a big time leadership author, called me, and just a series of other people. And that's how Berrett-Koehler started, was this outpouring of community support. We were formally incorporated in January of 1992, 31 years ago. And the foundational concepts, not surprisingly, were built around some of these same ideas. This is the first catalog that we published in 1992. And the letter in the front of it, I wrote, it could pretty much describe Berrett-Koehler today. If I were to choose one word to describe our vision, it would be stewardship. By this, I mean a deep sense of responsibility to administer the publishing company for the benefit of all of our stakeholder groups: authors, customers, employees, suppliers and subcontractors, owners, and the societal and environmental communities in which we live and work. Each of these groups contributes to the success of our publishing venture. Each has a stake or investment in success, whether that investment is time, talent, money, or other resources. We've been trying all these years to balance out the interests of all of the stakeholders, authors, employees, printers, suppliers, service providers, sales partners, customers, all of the different groups that you all know how many different groups it takes to make a publishing company successful. And it was this idea that publishing companies should just be run by some boss in New York City for the benefit of the corporate interest just didn't cut it with Berrett-Koehler then nor now. And so we've tried to live that out. One of the things we've tried to do, we call it eat our own cooking. So we published over 900 books, and we've tried to actually practice in our company the ideas in our books. Our books are in the area of business and management and leadership and personal growth and current affairs and societal change, and we try to practice them in your own company. My advice to you, don't try and do that. It's way too hard. When you have 900 different books and you're trying to follow the ideas in all those different books, you're setting it's a recipe for failure, because you're never gonna hold up to that ideal. And so we fall short in many ways, and then we feel bad about it, because we're trying to live up to an ideal, because in books there are a lot of great ideas, but nevertheless we're still trying to do that. Some of the other core concepts of Berrett-Koehler, connecting people and ideas to create a world that works for all. That's been our mission from the very beginning, early on, connecting people and ideas to create a world that works for all. We are author-friendly in the sense that we give authors more involvement in decision-making around their books than most publishers do. As Amy mentioned, we launch each book with an author day, a full-day author day. We have an unusual publication agreement that gives authors many more rights than many publication agreements do. We have about 150 of our authors are shareholders of the company, and have been big supporters. We have something that's a Berrett-Koehler Authors Cooperative, where the authors banded together and support each other and help each other and hold events each year, which is pretty unique in the world. It's an amazing organization. So Berrett-Koehler has published, as I mentioned, over 900 books. Over 300 of them have become bestsellers that we define as a book that sells 28,000 or more copies through all formats, print, digital, audio, in all languages. 70 have sold over 100,000 copies. 3 have sold between 1.5 million and 3.5 million copies. On the table back where the water is back there, there are 2 of our catalogs that some of you, if interested, you can get them. This catalog from summer 2022 has a list of these 300 bestsellers, so you can actually see what we've published. And then our most recent catalog is also back there, so anyone's interested can grab a catalog. Our books have been published in 54 different languages. In 2007, we started publishing all of our titles in ebook format. Every one of them, we were one of the early adopters in that respect. I think 2016, or Neil might correct me, 15 or 16, we started publishing all our books in audio format too, every one of them in audio format too. There's an article, an article that I particularly call attention to. It's called "The Far-Reaching Impact of Berrett-Koehler Publishers." If you just Google "The Far-Reaching Impact of Berrett-Koehler Publishers," it's an article from about 3 years ago that it tells a lot of the kinds of impact we've had. Now, much of the things in that article would be true of all of you as well, that they're basically the impact of a book publisher, period. And then some of it is particularly unique to Berrett-Koehler, but I'd encourage you to check this out. 4 years ago, I stepped down as CEO and president. During my entire career, from 1982, when I first became an editor, 41 years ago, I had always been an editor and an executive. And even when I was CEO of Joseph Bass Publishers, I still had an editorial list. When I was building Berrett-Koehler, I still had an editorial list. And as Berrett-Koehler got larger, more complex, it became harder and harder to do everything well. And to be quite candid, I really should have stepped down like 2 or 3 years earlier. That's the only regret I have, is I didn't do earlier, because over time I just couldn't really do both jobs well. So I kept the job that I felt I was better at and liked more, being the editor, gave up the more thankless job of being the CEO, which was a great decision. Our new CEO, president, done well, done great. I'm looking forward to the coming years. I feel as an editor, I'm at the very top of my game, in the sense that I have more experience, more connections with other people, more books being referred to me, being sent to me, more tools at my disposal, more techniques. I really have, more than I've ever had in terms of being able to be a good editor, and I feel good about that. On the other hand, and also with Zoom, I can work with authors all over the world. One day I might be meeting with an author in Africa or in Asia or in Europe or authors across the United States, and I just never could do that before. So I just think this is the best of all times to be an editor, in a book editor. I just don't think there's ever been a time nearly as good as right now to be an editor. On the other hand, these are very challenging times for book publishers, and we've talked about that this morning in what's going on in the area of supply chains and book manufacturing. Very difficult. In today's published PW Weekly, there's an article by the NPD Group's publishing industry analyst that talks more about the challenges. If we thought 2022 was challenging, what this analyst is saying in that article today is that there's going to be a lot more happening in 2023. So publishing is always interesting, never easy, always challenging, but always rewarding, and that's the way I feel. Finally, as Amy mentioned, in 2015, I founded another organization on a volunteer basis, which is Latter-day Saints in Publishing, Media, and the Arts, which its purpose is to help aspiring students and aspiring professionals, aspiring writers who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to connect with each other, to learn new skills, to develop their professional abilities. And it's done very well. It now has close to 2,000 members. I was the first president, then I stepped down from being president and became annual conference director on a volunteer basis, totally volunteer, no pay at all. Being annual conference director is a much bigger job than being president. Anyone who's trying to run conferences, but I just feel very blessed to be able to work in publishing. I made the right decision 46 years ago to go into publishing, and I just pinch myself for having to be able to work in this field, and I thank you for this recognition.